Awesome. All right, welcome everyone. So where we're going to be picking up today is on page 159. And we're picking up at the second full paragraph that says, all this time our friend. So 159, second full paragraph, all this time. And then I will throw that in the chat because I always forget to do that. Bam! We're almost at the end of the book, and I'm like, I remembered to do the thing. That's how this is going. Alrighty, so where we're at, 159, what's happened up until this point? And really what we're talking about is the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we're talking about how Bill Wilson went to Akron, Ohio and carried the message to Dr. Bob. And then Dr. Bob, after Dr. Bob was like, I am willing to do anything and everything except amends. Ew, gross. I don't want to do that. And then which is the historical term for it. It's very official. He went, ugh. And after his relapse, he went out and made all the amends that he was hesitant to make, and that marked the date of his permanent sobriety. And then last week, we were talking about how those two friends together, they knew if they were going to keep their heads above water, they knew if they were going to stay sober, they had to carry this message to others. So what they did was they went and they looked for other alcoholics to work with. And we saw last week them carry the message to Bill Dotson, AA number 3, and the gentleman who is known as AA number 4, Ernie Galbraith. And so we're seeing them in their 12-step work. And so that's where we're picking up on 159, second full paragraph. So it says, all this time our friend of the hotel lobby incident remained in that town. So that is Bill Wilson. So for that period of time, a couple months, Bill Wilson was living in Akron, Ohio. In fact, it'll tell me 3 months. If I would just not do that thing, I have a bad habit. I say the thing, and then I'm like, oh, the book says the thing. I could have just read. That's what I could have done. We get what we get, and it's okay to get upset. We'll just write inventory on it. Alrighty. He was there 3 months. He now returned home. And home for Bill Wilson, for those that don't know, is New York City. So again, they are in Akron, Ohio. Bill Wilson is there 3 months trying to salvage that business deal that absolutely went south, but also actively and intensively working with others. And he goes back to New York City. And it says, leaving behind his first acquaintance. Now that first acquaintance is Dr. Bob. The lawyer, that's Bill Dotson, and the devil-may-care chap, that's Ernie Galbraith. And again, I point this out because, and to be honest, when I was new, I was not reading A Vision for You. I was not, my sponsor would tell me to read something, and I'm sure I didn't, I wasn't breaking this down on my own. But I'll tell you, when we don't know who's who and what's what, it just kind of zooms right over my head. So that's what we're doing. We're breaking down who's who so we can make a note and remember and help others. So it says, these men had found something brand new in life. And when we talk about that something that is brand new, what we're talking about is that spiritual awakening. A very, very sneaky description of the spiritual awakening. That's what we're talking about. And it says, though they knew they must help other alcoholics if they would remain sober. I don't know if anyone has noticed. We should open a window. It's a little musty in here. We got a must. I heard that there was no must. Oh, turn on a fan or something. So they must help other alcoholics if they would remain sober. That is the reality for an alcoholic of my type. An alcoholic that is described in this book. That my sobriety, and we're going to see this again and again and again, and we saw it from the Roman numerals all the way as we're approaching the very end of the 164, that if I want permanent contented recovery, I've got to work with others. And at this point, they're not even talking about contented. They're talking about if I want to stay sober, I've got to work with others. But it says that motive And I want to point something out. A lot of times in AA, we talk about motives. And I'll throw out, we often talk about motives in in places and in times where it's not actually asking us to check our motives. But where it does ask us to check our motives, it's like, I'm not looking at that. No, thank you. Don't want to check that. I'm sure nobody can relate to be like, oh, what are my motives in sponsoring somebody or making an amends or writing inventory? Girl, just do it. Just do it. You'll get the relief. But then when it's telling us, hey, check our motives before getting into a relationship or after we've recovered, before going to a place where there is drinking, it's like I got my blinders on. I don't want that. I don't want that suggestion. But what I will say is, even if I don't have perfect motives and my motive in working with others is purely self-preservation because I don't want to drink again, or it's because my sponsor told me I had to and I don't want my sponsor to be mad at me, that is okay. What I want to share is my experience is that we can get well with imperfect motives as long as we take action. But if I have perfect motives but no action, I cannot get well. So that motive became secondary. It was transcended by the happiness they found in giving themselves for others. You see, that experience overcomes my motives. Transcended happiness in giving themselves for others. Man, and this is how we know Alcoholics Anonymous is experiential. Because if you told me when I was new that, Paige, what you will find is a happiness that is transcendent as you sit down with other alcoholics and read the doctor's opinion again and again, I'd be like, are you out of your mind? Right? There's no way that's true. But those of us who've done it, man, you know what it's like. You know what it's like when you're sitting with the sponsee, sitting with a newcomer, you're going through the book or you're going through the work, and it starts to click for them. Oh, yeah, that's me. Oh, yeah, that's me. Or they start writing inventory and they're starting to see, oh, man, I was wrong. And the light starts to come on. Man, that was everything that I was missing in life and I had no idea. And again, this sounds insane if you are somebody that hasn't done this. But everything that I was looking for in the bottle, I found in the eyes of the alcoholic who was recovering before me as I took them through the steps. Man, that is the stuff. So it was transcended by the happiness they found in giving themselves for others. This whole thing is so much more than just don't drink and stay dry and it'll be fun. No, it's not. This whole thing is so much more than that. It is a way of life that brings about joy, transcendent joy, meaning and purpose, and a life beyond anything we could have imagined. And that is not predicated on my external circumstances. There is something powerful here. It goes on to say, they gladly shared their homes, their slender resources. They shared their homes, their slender resources. They gladly devoted their spare hours to fellow sufferers. Again, I want to point out, it's got to be inconvenient. And some of y'all are probably sick of hearing me say that. If I'm not at least a little bit inconvenienced by my sponsees, I either don't have enough sponsees or we're not working intensively enough. I got to be a little inconvenienced because I don't know what's good for me. But it's not saying we ignore our job or our family or we can't have hobbies. We are giving those spare hours. So, gladly devoted their spare hours to fellow sufferers. They were willing by day or night to place a new man in the hospital and visit him afterwards. So again, it's inconvenient. There are times where there's other things we'd like to do, and we show up. It says they grew in numbers. They experienced a few distressing failures. And man, if you've worked with people, you know what that's like. It's hard not to fall in love. And I don't mean that in a weird way. Like, please no, I mean that in it's hard not to just fall in love with us, like with alcoholics. And when you see them trying and you see them starting to get it, and it's heartbreaking when they stop answering the phone, when you lose them. That is hard. But here's what they did. But in those cases, they made an effort to bring the man's family into a spiritual way of living. Let's be clear. What is the spiritual way of living? It is these 12 steps as a way of life. So they offered these 12 steps to the family members. And it says, thus relieving much worry and suffering. Now you can make a little note in your book to see page 97 when we'll pop over there. But that relieving of worry and suffering, that's what we're seeing in the first half of the chapter, Two Wives. One of the most consistent suggestions in that chapter. Now that chapter is not for wives. That chapter is for those who are as bound to the alcoholic. Hello, welcome. As the alcoholic is bound to alcohol. For those who are unable to quit the alcoholic, just like I'm unable to quit alcohol. And the most effective thing that they can do is work these 12 steps themselves. And we read about that in the family afterward. You got a partner that's on a spiritual tangent. You know what's going to help level them off? Being a more incredible demonstration of this way of life. But at the very bottom paragraph of page 97, I hopefully gave you time to find it. I did go on a tangent, and we can pretend I did that on purpose so you would have time to find it. How thoughtful. Nobody's believing me. That's fair. That's fair. So page 97, very bottom paragraph in the chapter Working with Others. It says, though an alcoholic does not respond, those heartbreaking failures where the alcoholic isn't interested, doesn't want it. It says there is no reason why you should neglect his family. You should continue to be friendly to them. The family should be offered your way of life. Our way of life is what? The 12 steps as outlined in this book. Should they accept and practice spiritual principles? What are spiritual principles? The 12 steps as outlined in this book. There is a much better chance the head of the family will recover. And even though he continues to drink, the family will find life much more bearable. And so that in those early days, because they would often meet the alcoholic through their family, the family would reach out. And then the 12-stepped recovered members would reach out to the alcoholic who was suffering. So they had those family contacts. In 2026, oh man, I was good for all of January. That's the first time anywho, and whatever year we're in, it's we don't really know each other's family in that way, especially when we just meet the newcomer. But I will tell you my lived experience, and I'll use that lived experience to give you guys time to go back to page 159, because I'm thoughtful and considerate. But I'll tell you my lived experience when I'm working with somebody, and they go out, or I have a loved one that is not interested in the program of recovery that I have. You know, I've had people in my life where I would give anything that I could to help them, and they didn't get it. What do I do with that energy? What do I do with that? And I really believe that desire to help, that want to help, man, of course, for somebody like me, it can turn into unhealthy codependency. I know you guys can't relate. You are the pinnacle of health, but a little sicko over here. But I do believe that instinct is a God-given instinct, but it is just misaligned. And if there is somebody in my life that doesn't want it, that's okay. What do I do? Is I go and I find somebody who does. So when I am worried, and let's be real, there's times I get worried about sponsees, or I get worried about people, and they're not interested. If I go and I find somebody that is, and I bust my butt to make this thing possible for them, it's a reminder that everyone has somebody in their life that would give anything if they could only get sober. And even though I may not be able to help the one that I want to help, I'm giving that grace to somebody who needs it. And it's been a little bit of a weird time in my life personally. There's been a number of people sort of adjacent to me that have passed away from this illness. And again, it might feel like, but they're gone. How could I possibly help? The exact same thing. Direct that energy to somebody who's open, to somebody who might want it. That is a God-given energy that needs a place to go. And so that idea of we bring the family in, we go help somebody who wants it. Man, one of the most surefire signs, and I talk about this a lot, one of the most surefire signs of a spiritual awakening is the desire to go help somebody else. Which does not mean if you don't have that desire, don't go help somebody. Go do it anyways. Then you'll get it. Then you'll get the desire. So page 159, bottom paragraph. It says, and hopefully, oh man, I thought I gave you guys time to find it. That's okay. 159, bottom paragraph. It says, a year and 6 months later, these 3 had succeeded with 7 more. Welcome, we're on page 159. So a year and 6 months later, these 3 had succeeded with 7 more. So there's 10. Probably 9 because Bill left. So 9 in Akron, Ohio. So they're seeing some success. They're seeing, the value of what they were doing. One alcoholic working with another. And keep in mind, at this point in history, we don't have a book. We have some ideas from the Oxford group that weren't labeled and put into practical order like how we have them today. There were some principles and some ideas, but it wasn't as formalized as we have, and so they're just doing their best to try to figure it out. And it says, seeing much of each other, scarce an evening passed that someone's home did not shelter a little gathering of men and women, happy in their release, and constantly thinking of how they might present their discovery to some newcomer. So they were meeting, but what were they meeting? They were meeting, and of course they were talking about the joy that they had in escape from disaster together. But they were also thinking, how can I help somebody else? And if you're thinking, wow, this is an out of nowhere sentence, nobody's actually thinking that. But I'm preparing us for a bounce around, just a little one. Let's go to page 20. So we're going to pop over to page 20, and then we're going to bounce right back to 159. So page 20. And we'll see that this is not a new idea. And I do a lot of bouncing around in these later chapters, because a lot of times we don't look at those later chapters because we don't think that they apply to us, or we don't think they have information that it's almost like supplementary, or not even supplementary, just like adjacent, like it's not even important. But what we see is the information is a continuation of everything that we've gone through already. It's a continuation of that beautiful tapestry that is being laid out in those first few pages. So page 20, the first 3 lines, where it says, now if you've been rocking and rolling, you probably have like stars, and I probably told you to draw like a unicorn or a capybara. You've got some weird things beside it. But this line, here it is. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. Our very lives depend on us thinking of others and thinking of how we can best help them. And what are their needs? Of course, our family needs our love and our attention, and if we're employed, our job needs, again, our attention, and our love. But what we're also talking about is those who need a spiritual awakening. How can I best carry this message to those who need it most? So let's pop back over to page 159. So what we're talking about is that little gathering of men and women, happy in their release. And what is that release? That release is that freedom from the bondage of the obsession of the mind, but also the freedom from the bondage of self. They're describing that spiritual awakening and constantly thinking how they might present their discovery to some newcomer, how they can help somebody else. It says, in addition to these casual get-togethers. Now, for those of you who hang out with me on a Monday night at 8 p.m. and a Friday night at 8 p.m., you're like, I've heard of this before, because I read this at the start of those ones. So, in addition to these casual get-togethers, it became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. These 12 steps are a spiritual way of life. This whole thing is a way of life. Very top of page 160. So glad you're here. Absolutely. So that's what this is. So, and what we're going to see is what was the original purpose of meetings? What was the original point? It says, aside from fellowship and sociability. So we're not saying don't fellowship. Fellowship. Be social. Be connected. And here's what I'll even say. Be inspired. Be inspired. But what was the main aim? It says its prime object So the main purpose was to provide a time and place where new people might bring their problems. So if new people are bringing their problems, I'm not new. I mean, some of you are like, what are you, new? That's just a state of being. But I'm saying I have recovered. So what is my responsibility? To bring a solution to those problems. So again, I'm not saying don't come for the fun. Don't come for the fun. Come for the fellowship. Come to have a laugh. Come to get connected. Come to be social. Come to be inspired. You know, but yes, my focus at a meeting is to bring a solution, to find who I can help. And I talk about this, man, we're on tangent. So hopefully everyone who's trying to find page 160 has plenty of time. If you're at a meeting, and maybe it's one of those meetings where there's so many people you don't get a chance to share, or it's a meeting like this where you have one little redhead from Canada that just natters on for 95% of the time. Well, how do we find ways to be of service? And I like to describe it as ninja service, because I like to do service and don't get caught. You know, find a way to be of service, find a way to find somebody to help. And so we don't have chairs you got to put away. You don't got to wash coffee cups. Well, if you made your own coffee, wash your own coffee cup. Yeah. But we don't have coffee cups. But one of the things is when I go to meetings, and sometimes there's not a lot of newcomers. And so can I listen? Can I listen to that person for that person that is in pain? Maybe they've been around a while and they're in pain. Can I listen for that? Can I make sure I reach out to them? Maybe I can't grab them right after the meeting, but can I reach out to them after? Can I offer them? If I've had a similar experience, can I say, man, I went through that. Here's how I took it through inventory. If you want, let me help you. Can I offer that? And listen, this ties right back into at the end of working with others. Oh gosh, no worries. No worries. You come when you come. You go when you gotta go. I'm just letting people show up. It'd be not a whole lot of fun. If it was me doing it by myself, Vivian might be like, this is a little too intense. So I'm glad when people come. But at the end of working with others, it gave us the directions on how we can go to places where there is drinking. The conditions for that. The first condition is that I be recovered, that I be, 12-step working with others. I'm in fit spiritual condition, but then to check my motives. Am I focusing on what can I bring? And the more that I do that in all areas of my life, the better all areas of my life get. Even meetings. So if I can focus on showing up and what can I bring, who can I help? Man, that gets me way less annoyed when that redheaded Canadian just won't stop nattering. It gets me way less annoyed when they're, I saw a meme the other day. It's like, wow, these 12 steps really work. I'm completely free from judgment, except for the people that are doing AA wrong, which I thought was like, oh yeah. Right? And if I can show up with that love, that tolerance, that service, man, it's wild how effective it is. Anyway, so new people might bring their problems. Welcome, we're on page 160. First, now full paragraph. It said, outsiders became interested. One man and his wife. Now this is T. Henry and Clarence Williams in Akron, Ohio. And I probably have the wife's name pronounced wrong, but, T. Henry, Clarence Williams, Akron, Ohio. And their home was 676 Palisades Drive. So if anyone wants to go and stalk that house, actually be responsible if you're in Akron. I'm not saying stalk people. There's the address. All right. Outsiders became interested. One man and his wife placed their large home at the disposal of this strangely assorted crowd. Which, if you have ever gone to any meeting anywhere, you're like, why, yes, this is a strangely assorted crowd. It's like a box of mismatched socks, but spiritually, Maybe that's what up with my metaphor when I'm like, hey, we've had profound spiritual awakenings, but, we put our socks weird places. I don't know. I didn't need to tie that metaphor in. Anywho, so it says, this couple has since become so fascinated that they have dedicated their home to the work. Many a distracted wife has visited this house to find loving and understanding companionship among women who knew her problem. So again, this was not an individual. The alcoholic goes, alcoholic gets well. The family went. And who often reaches out for help first? The loved one of an alcoholic. So the loved one would hear about, hey, these alcoholics in Akron, they're getting sober, and would visit this house and say, do you have an answer for my loved one? And it says to hear from the lips of their husbands what had happened to them and what had happened. What had happened was a spiritual awakening that came as the result of what would become our 12 steps. That's what we share. That's the hope. And it says, and what had happened to them, to be advised how her own wayward mate might be hospitalized and approached when he next stumbled. And I want to point out, they're talking about that window of willingness. So they're waiting. They're waiting until the alcoholic has gone on a bender and burnt their life to the ground, where they might have that window that's open. Because man, if I've got everything that I think I need, I don't got any problems. That window is closed. If I don't got problems, I don't need your solution. Stop nagging me and telling me what I need to do. By the way, they're not nagging. I'm just not doing the thing they asked me to do in the first place. It just feels like nagging. I'm just throwing that out there. But that's what it is. And so they're talking about operating within that window of willingness. And that, again, is not a new idea. It was telling us to do that as we work with others. And so it says, many a man, yet dazed from his hospital experience, has stepped over the threshold of that home into freedom. Now, if you've been coming to this big book study or one of my studies before, you probably have a note that says page 41, and then probably like I have with a little smiley face, and you're like, uh-oh, what's happening on page 41? First and foremost, yeah, and I'm gonna make my Fred jokes, but first and foremost, what is a threshold? A threshold is very literally a doorway. But in spiritual terms, a threshold is a transition from one plane to another. I mean, that's also a literal definition of what a threshold is. So we might have a sneaky little see page 41. So let's pop over to page 41 just to tie this loop. And we would have done this when we were here, but we haven't been here for a while, and it's a little bit funny. And please know that I'm doing this just tongue-in-cheek. This is a tongue-in-cheek game. So for top of 41, it's actually going to be the very, very bottom of page 40 that we're gonna kick off our reading. Bottom of 40, top of 41. And this is our guy. This is Fred. Now, Fred, what we're going to see, spoilers, is his bout with the obsession of the mind. And the obsession of the mind is the unstoppable force that compels me to take that first drink. The thought that I have when I am sober that compels me to take that first drink. Now, when we get to this part of the book, I like to joke. This is just a joke. I'm like, let's see if we can play a game. And that game is finding Fred's triggers. Again, tongue-in-cheek, just making a joke. And all right, let's see. Fred, let's see in his story, what is his trigger? And now you'll catch it. All right. So he says, in this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks, and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard work of a simple matter. One day, I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. Okay, could that be a trigger? Being out of town? That could be his trigger. Let's find out. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. That's not a trigger. Maybe he wasn't feeling well physically. He was a little physically unwell. Physically, I felt fine. Okay, that's not his trigger. Well, could it be he had a lot of pressing problems and worries and stress? Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. Okay, you know what? Maybe he absolutely, fumbled that whole accounting evidence. Maybe he absolutely messed up that meeting and he's feeling really bad about it. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. Okay, Okay, so that's not his trigger. Here it is. I think I figured it out, y'all. I think his trigger is clouds. It's gotta be clouds. It was the end of a perfect day. Not a cloud on the horizon. Darn it, that's not his trigger. All right, what could it be? I went to my hotel. Now, that's not his trigger because he was already there. And it says, and leisurely dressed for dinner. And he clearly showed up wearing pants to the, business because he said it went well. So no cops were called. So that's not his trigger. And it says, as I crossed the threshold of the dining room, there it is. There's his trigger. Thresholds. All he needed to do was just avoid thresholds. No thresholds, and he can stay sober. And then it goes on. The thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. And that thought is the obsession of the mind. And I do that as a tongue-in-cheek thing because as we go back to page 160, it says, many a man, yet days from his hospital experience, has stepped over the threshold of that home into freedom. How wonderful it is that I have a solution that works, that allows me to be free. Free whether it's a cloudy day or not. Free whether I'm in, presenting government accounting evidence to a government bureau. Free to cross thresholds where I don't have to try to control the things outside of me. Try to manage the world outside of me to stay sober, which is to say to do the impossible for an alcoholic. It would be impossible for an alcoholic to try to avoid triggers. Because what is the ultimate trigger? Consciousness. That's it. That's it. It really is. The alcoholic to drink again is inevitable and is never contingent on anything outside of myself, but it is always, always contingent upon the maintenance of my spiritual condition. It speaks about it, that at the end of Two Wives on page 120, where it's like, man, there's something the matter with his spiritual status. Anyway, and at the end of Working with Others. So, back on page 160. Many a man, yet dazed from his hospital experience, has stepped over the threshold of that home into freedom. Many a man who entered there came away with an answer. And I just want to pause because I love my dear friend Terry. He talks about, and I'm pretty sure he stole this from a dear friend of ours, Babe, but he talks about this. This is a book of mirrors. And I want to hold this book up to my own experience. And I want to do that, of course, with the description of what is alcoholism. And then as I go through the work, I want to hold that up to the work that I am doing. And I want to hold up the mirror to the light of the results of the work. And I get to do that all the way through. But when it says, many an alcoholic who entered there came away with an answer. Am I bringing the answer to the meetings that I go to? Am I bringing the solution? I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to say the right thing every single time. But am I doing my utmost to make sure those who have not found the answer that we have can find one here in Alcoholics Anonymous? Am I doing that? Which is rude, Paige. You just took us on a silly little tangent. Now you're giving me some responsibility. Y'all don't have to. This is what I got to do. I won't make you do it, but this is what I got to do. It says he succumbed to that gay crowd inside who laughed at their own misfortunes and understood his. You know that laughter at after a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous? And I will say, I have a dear friend. I've done Steel on Steel with her. We've been close. We've been trudging this road for many, many, many years. And we were at her baby shower, and she's in Alcoholics Anonymous, and her husband's in Alcoholics Anonymous, and so all the friends are in AA. And it was the only baby shower that I went to where people are casually talking about the interlock devices you get on your car after a DUI. Baby shower talk. and we do that thing. We're like, and then the beep, beep, and then we're laughing away. And am I bringing that joy? Am I bringing that laughter? And again, I am not asking. I'm not asking that we put on a mask. I'm not asking that we lie. I'm not asking that we pretend everything's okay when our world is falling apart. But what I'm saying is that I have a responsibility to those that do not know that there is an answer, to work these 12 steps as a way of life, so that those that are in the darkness, those that are in suffering, those that are miserable, whether they've been around for a while or not, can find this answer that I have been able to find so freely. And I love that it's like laughed at their own misfortune. And why can we laugh? Because we're free. Because we're free. We don't live there anymore. You know, we're laughing at our own misfortune, and we hear what you're saying. We've been there. Let us help you find the way out. Impressed by those who visited him at the hospital, he capitulated entirely when later in an upper room of this house, he heard the story of some man whose experience closely tallied with his own. Now, capitulate, that's a good $10 word. What are we talking about? So the word is surrender. Surrender. So it says, impressed by those who visited him at the hospital, he surrendered entirely. And you might be like, okay, Paige, why are they using the word capitulate? Actually, I'll tell you, this is a tangent that is not helpful and will not keep anyone sober. But when I was in university, I had to take a speech class. And I did a speech that was on the topic of ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. It was a disproven evolutionary theory, but a whole lot of fun to say, so I did a talk on it. I know, I am a hoot. Some of you are like, oh God, we can tell. Yikes. Yikes. But why would they use the word capitulate? Well, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I don't even play one on TV. But I do know that the Oxford group, the big thrust of what they were about was surrender. Surrendering to God, receiving guidance from the will of the God of their understanding. And keep in mind, at this time, the Oxford group was well known, and actually probably being known by a slightly different name at this point in history. It would, I believe it was at the end of the 1930s where they began to be known as moral rearmament. And so they did not want to be affiliated with that movement, and not out of judgment or anything like that, but because they knew that they needed to be their own independent thing. Ironically, I'm describing what they were doing as they were writing the book, but the people in Akron didn't feel the same way. Much of Akron did not want to separate from the Oxford group. They felt very at home in the Oxford group. And it was actually Cleveland, and actually we're going to talk about Cleveland here in a bit, that they were they were the first ones to separate. So what allowed him to surrender? What allowed the newcomer to surrender? When later in an upper room of this house, so they were working one-on-one, so not in a big group, but one-on-one, or two-on-one, like working in a smaller group, trying to help this person. He heard the story of some man whose experience closely tallied with his own. So this, and I talk about this a lot, this is where my war stories are eminently useful. This is where I want to share my war stories. See, if I'm sitting with somebody and they talk about, yeah, man, I was on the streets, I'm going to share my stories of what it was like living on the streets. If they're talking about they're struggling at work, I'm going to share about, listen, I got some stories. I was maybe a little under what would be legally described as the influence, and working a high stacker, which is not safe, and I'll talk about the struggles that I had. And I want to be able to help them to identify, not just talk about what I want to talk about. And that's what helped them to surrender. Because I think we all come with that denial. We all come with a bit of, I'm not like you. I got my andas, I got my yeah buts, and I got my I'm different. And that's also why I like to speak so clearly about the symptoms. Because, man, you might not relate to working on a stacker or sleeping behind a dumpster because y'all are classy. But you will relate to the allergy. And I know you'll relate to the obsession because you're just like me. And it says that it goes on to say the expression on the faces of the women, the indefinable something in the eyes of the men. Now I know I shouldn't be bouncing around as much as we are, but I want us to make a little note to go back and see page 9. that indefinable something in the eyes of the men. So we're talking about this indefinable something that happens as the result of the spiritual awakening. Let's pop all the way back to Bill's story. Page 9. And what we're going to do is we are going to go to the first full paragraph where it said, right after drinkers are like that, the door opened and he stood there. So page 9, first full paragraph. And what we're talking about in Bill's story is Bill Wilson, man, he is drunk and he is hopeless and he knows he cannot stay sober. And as the story goes, maybe not what historically actually happened, but as the story goes, he was drinking in his kitchen table. Abby Thatcher told the story differently, and he was the one who was sober, so he was probably more accurate on that. It was in like a upper living room, and Lois was there, but that doesn't matter. What matters, page 9, first full paragraph, the door opened. Abby Thatcher, he has taken a course of action, and he's had an experience. And this is what happened. So the door opened. He stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. And here's the tie-in. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? And Abby Thatcher has already carried a message, and he hasn't even opened his mouth. And how did Abby Thatcher do that? He had been transformed from the inside out. That was what allowed him for Bill Wilson to get curious. Bill Wilson doesn't stay open. He's like, oh, you've got religion? Gross. Ew. Yuck. No, thank you. Because the Oxford group, they were religious. But that, at least for me, is an important reminder. You know, I think we all know what it's like when we come to the rooms and we see those people that have it. We don't even know what it is, but they're smiling and they are laughing and that there is a light. And I talk about the people where it's like their serenity enters the room before they do. You know, those people, and it's like, man, you can just feel that they're a safe person. That is my responsibility. I'm not saying it's yours. Y'all don't got to do nothing. I can't make you if I wanted to. But that is my responsibility. My responsibility to those who are new. My responsibility to those who are hurting. My responsibility to those who are struggling. My responsibility to those who have not found a way out is to be a demonstration. Again, I'm not faking it. You can't fake light. You know what I mean? You can try to fake serenity, but we can feel the tension underneath. Everything's great. You know, my responsibility is to work this program, these 12 steps, with such vigor, with such depth, with such intensity, that you cannot deny that a change has happened to me. And that I can shine a light that is not my own into the darkness in the lives of others. That's my responsibility. It doesn't have to be yours. But I'll tell you, when I, on the off chance, live up to that responsibility, don't think I'm little Miss Effervescent here. I'm human and deeply flawed and frequently wrong. But when I do that, man, the world changes. Again, that focus on what can I bring. So let's go back to page 160. I should have told y'all to do that before I went on that tangent. It's so rude of me. I'm not timing it very well. So I'll read it in just a little bit. So when it says, impressed by those who had visited him in the hospital, he capitulated, surrendered entirely, when later in an upper room of this house, he heard the story of some man whose experience closely tallied with his own. The expression on the faces of the women, the indefinable something in the eyes of the men, the stimulating and electric atmosphere of the place. It conspired to let him know that here was haven at last. Now, I don't have the original manuscript in front of me, but thank you. But a lot of in the original manuscript, a lot of the places that it referenced heaven a number of times. Heaven, here was heaven at last. And a lot of those got changed to haven and utopia. Because there were some people of certain religious groups who felt, no, you can't say heaven is a present tense thing. It has to be a location for after. And I'm not saying theology or arguing theology, and I've shared this before. I'll tell you what my lived experience is. My lived experience is that hell is my life as I was living it. Hell was the here and now of my life in untreated alcoholism. And heaven can just as much be in the here and now, in my lived experience. That consciousness, that presence of a power beyond myself. Here was haven at last. And even if we don't want to use the word heaven, we want to read it as it's literally written. Here is haven, a safe place. Man, we were shipwrecked, right? Drowning in the ocean of alcoholism, and we have found safety. It goes on to say, the very practical approach to his problems. And I've got some news. Unfortunately, this is how we are called to show up to meetings and to work with others. Because this is what those who were recovering, those who had recovered were finding. So this is what I need to bring. I'm not saying y'all got to, but this is what I need to bring. And the first is the practical approach to his problems. Now, I know some of y'all who know me are going to be like, girl, with the amount that you talk about inventory, that can't be practical. But I promise you, those who write inventory, those who practice these spiritual actions, we know how immensely practical it is. And the more that I take my inventory, the more that I'm able to say, man, I hear you. What you are going through is hard. I am so sorry you're going through it. If you want, I have found that this has helped me, and I'll walk you through this process, and I'll help you take this through the inventory columns, whether it be fear, resentment, fear, or sex or relationship conduct. That is immensely practical. Not, hey, you should call your sponsor. Go sort it out. But let me help you. Hey, I hear you. I've carried weight, the weight of guilt and shame just like that. Let me help you. If you're open to show you how I made amends, maybe I can help you make the amends that you feel you need to make. It is immensely practical. But I have to have experience for it to be practical. Otherwise, it is only theoretical. Listen, in all theory, who knows? I might be really good at alpine skiing, ski jumping, or, no, I am not. And some of y'all know, girl, don't you have to stand for that? Yeah. I don't. Yeah, there are adaptive skiing, but that's out of budget for this gal. So the very practical approach to his problems, I promise you, spirituality, these 12 steps, is immensely practical. And this is another one. The absence of intolerance of any kind. Now that might feel like a tall order, but that's what we're called to bring. The informality. That informality is not that like headmaster's study, well, but that we're here and we're friends, and you know what I mean? That informality. The genuine democracy. That we are shoulder to shoulder, that we are all equal. No one's voice is louder than anyone. Well, I know I'm loud. I meant in the spirit of the voice, not in terms of my vocal range, which is, girl, please speak slower and please speak quieter. I know. But the genuine democracy, the uncanny understanding which these people had were irresistible. If I want to help, can I bring those? Can I bring those qualities to my life? Can I bring those qualities to my home group? Can I bring those qualities to my meetings? Can I bring those qualities to all areas of my life? And if you're like me, I can't bring them. I got to get me out of the way, and I got to let that power flow through me. I got to channel them. So it says he and his wife would leave elated with the thought of what they could now do for some stricken acquaintance and his family. They're not feeling simply elated that the problem is solved, that there is an answer, but they're also feeling elated that they can help somebody else. Again, one of the most sure signs of a spiritual awakening is the desire to go help another person. So it says they had a host of new friends. It seemed they had known these strangers always. And isn't that the case? One of my most ignored suggestions from sponsees, which I know you're gonna assume it's about relationships. It's not. I don't even bother. They don't listen. I'm just kidding. But one of my most ignored suggestions is when you're traveling out of town, go to a local meeting. And I say that for a number of reasons, and for some reason that one gets ignored a lot. But for those that do take me up on it, There is a very quick intimacy that we have with each other. There's a quick familiarity. There's a quick companionship. And then sometimes they'll take you around and show you all the places because they just love being a tour guide, especially if you go somewhere that doesn't get a lot of people. Not Scott. Scott's like, listen, you gotta travel Thailand on your own. I'm just helping with boundaries. I know you're good with them on your own. But that's what we're talking about. Like that quick connection. It's like, man, I feel like I've known these people for years and you've just been going a couple weeks. And it says they had seen miracles and one was to come to them. Never underestimate what Alcoholics Anonymous does. To be a recovered alcoholic is nothing less than a miracle. What is a miracle? A miracle is a sudden, well, it doesn't even have to be sudden, but it is a change to the natural order of things. The natural order, right? A natural order is that an alcoholic continues to drink. We know that to be true based off our step one experience. An alcoholic will continue to drink again and again and again. Despite all the things that we want to do to stay sober, all the ways in which we need to stay sober, and yet here we are, sober, recovered, the obsession is gone. That is nothing less than a miracle. And we see miracles. I believe in miracles because I witness miracles. My dear friend Terry talks about, I believe in miracles because I am a miracle. And they are aware that what we get to experience is nothing less than miraculous. And it's more than mere sobriety. Yeah, absolutely. To be healed in a deep and profound way. People who are doomed to die of this illness. And this is not a pretty way to die. And it affects all those who love us. And we get to be alive and we get to be sober and we get to be useful. And it is a miracle. And it can and it will happen to each and every one of us. The only thing that is asked of me, and you're like, girl, only? It's kind of a big ask. But the only thing that is asked of me is these 12 steps as a way of life. That's it. That is all that is asked of me. To experience a life beyond anything I could have ever imagined. But I mean... we got to do it, which is rude, but it is miraculous. And way early on in the book, it talks about a wholesale miracle. It's like we're going to Costco and getting Costco-sized miracles. It is available to everyone. It goes on to say, it says they'd seen miracles and one was to come to them. They had visioned the capital G, capital R, great reality. And then we have an M dash. Now an M dash is used for emphasis. I was going to say emphasis. You put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, Paige. But it's used for emphasis. It's also used for additional information. But what is the great reality? Capital G, capital R. It is their loving and capital A, capital C, capital P, capital C. Their loving and all-powerful Creator. We had begun to vision that experience of God. This idea of the God that we were reading about in We Agnostics was just an idea. It was just a conception. But now it is beginning, and not even beginning, it is something we had visioned. We have experienced. I can't stay well on an idea. I can't stay well on simply a belief. I need an experience that I grow and I deepen. And that's what we're talking about here. We have those experiences and then we help others. And that experience happens as the results of the 12 steps. And again, when I point out capitalizations, I'm pointing to words that are meaning the same thing as God. So if you don't like the word God, that's more than okay. Use great reality, use Creator, use all-powerful Creator, although I will say God is one word and one syllable, and all-powerful Creator is a bit of a mouthful, but use it if you want, because those are just titles, and what I'm after is beyond the title. I need a relationship with that which is beyond the name, the title, and that is what the 12 steps bring, and that is what the 12 steps bring about in our lives. and the lives of those that we get to work with. And then next week, we're going to see that, man, that it was working, because that house was getting filled up. 60 to 80 is a rule. And then we'll talk more about Cleveland, and we'll talk about Clarence Snyder. We'll talk about difficult people. Difficult people in AA? I couldn't believe it. Alrighty, I'll stop the record.